And following today's presentation, we'll have a Q&A. We encourage attendees to submit those comments and questions through the Zoom Q&A function. We'll also be sharing today's presentation following today's call. We will be having a national policy update towards the end of our call, but we'll definitely have, again, enough time for Q&A following today's presentation. Speaking of which, we're thrilled to have Cassandra Skidanov join us for today's community impact briefing. A couple of quick opening points about our presenter. Cassandra Skidanov is an affordable lending senior manager on the equitable housing team in Freddie Mac's single family mission and community engagement group. She's responsible for leading equitable housing strategies to increase housing stock and access to credit by utilizing market and consumer research, housing insights, and strategic analysis. After building a 20-year career in mortgage, real estate, and community relations, Ms. Skidanov joined Freddie Mac in 2018 to continue her dedication to supporting quality and housing, increasing production, and sourcing housing solutions to meet the vast and diverse needs of an evolving housing market. Ms. Skidanov holds dual masters in science and communications and leadership from Purdue University, my alma mater, by the way, and current doctoral candidate at the University of Southern California. On today's call, Cassandra will be sharing the latest updates on Freddie Mac's Develop the Developer program, which is an innovative program focused on the reinvestment and development of affordable housing in historically underserved communities. The program strives to address the critical national housing challenges around the affordable housing supply shortage, in addition to helping fill the gaps in knowledge and critical skills for emerging real estate developers. The Develop the Developer program offers mechanisms supporting connectivity and support within local markets, and most importantly, the disproportionate representation of women, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, BIPOC developers within the single family and multifamily development industry. With that, let me welcome Cassandra Skidanov to today's NCST Community Impact Briefing. Cassandra, I think you're all set to share your screen, so I'll turn the controls, so to speak, over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. That was a fantastic, welcome. I have to start thinking about taking that 20 years out of my bio. I feel like I'm aging myself. But thank you all so much for joining me. And Chris, can you give me a thumbs up? Can you see my screen?
Looks great.
Fantastic.
Looks great, sounds great.
Fantastic. So yes, again, I'm joining you all today to tell you a little bit more about our Develop the Developer program. The intention for the presentation today is I really want to give you all an overview of the work that we've done so far over the last few years. And I'm hoping that we can even take some time today during the Q&A to think about ways that we may be able to continue to partner with organizations like NCST, and how we can continue to expand the Develop the Developer program. So with that said, let's jump right in. I am going to turn off my camera so that we can focus on our wonderful slideshow here. And let's get into the Develop the Developer program. So, one of the things I want to start off with is, again, just kind of grounding you on where the Develop the Developer program originated from. We initially launched this program at Freddie Mac back in 2020. We launched in a very small town in northern Omaha that is a predominantly Black community, a historical Black community. Malcolm X was born there. I think Malcolm X has a birthday coming up this month. But one of the things that we thought about when we started working in North Omaha, we brought a lot of our nonprofit stakeholders together and really started to ideate about how we could create more affordable housing stock. That was one of the big, rocks to move when we think about from Freddie Mac's side. A lot of people think of our organization in the means of providing liquidity in the mortgage space, which is fantastic, but you need a house to provide a mortgage on if we're going to be able to provide liquidity. So thinking about housing stock has been a natural evolution for Freddie Mac. And how can we help to remove some of the barriers to home ownership by ensuring that we've got affordable housing stock that is resilient and dignified, specifically in our underserved communities. I know I don't need to tell NCST, I don't need to preach to you all about some of the challenges we have throughout the country with aging housing stock, blighted houses, vacant lots that still need development. So these were some of the same issues that really bubbled up to the top back in 2020 when we were working in Omaha. So the solution that we came up with is an answer to a call that Omaha asked us of, how can you help us create more native developers? Meaning people who live in the community that want to redevelop and develop housing in the community. They felt that having people who live in the community would really support more community centric development. And yes, we have nonprofit developers in those spaces, but one of the things that they pointed out is the lift was really too much for just them. So if there is an opportunity to introduce more private developers that would be interested in coming in and performing some of the redevelopment and developing those areas without causing any negative gentrification, then that was something that was a nut that they really wanted to look at how to crack. So the solution that I came up with was introducing what we now call the Develop the Developer program. And what this program really focuses in on is finding people who live in communities that maybe have transferable skills, right? Have you worked in the construction industry before? Have you worked in urban planning? Have you worked for a housing intermediary and enough that you might be able to learn a little bit more about Development 101 and learn a little bit more about how to obtain development financing, and would that help you launch your first development project? The goal was to help find people that could actually transition to become developers, and find people who maybe have between 0 to 3 years of experience. So the goal is to help people transition in a way that they're not learning by fire, which is from the market feedback that we got over the years. That's one of the main ways specifically minorities and women who do manage to enter into the development space have a tendency of learning by fire, which I mean is, they're running into every challenge and problem they ever could have. And that typically stops them from becoming more seasoned developers where they stay in the development field for another 4 or 5 years and ongoing. They get started, experience some failure right out the back or some loss, and then they're not able to continue on. So we really wanted to look at ways that we could support these emerging developers, inspire investment into underserved areas by giving them enough information, knowledge, and support to help them get from what we consider that first rung in development to that second rung in development where they can become more experienced. We did obtain, some accolades recently from the Diversity Journal, recognizing the Develop the Developer program for the work that we're doing, which is fantastic. But to me, the best accolades come from the developers and the success that they're seeing in the marketplace. So let's talk a bit about the Develop the Developer education model. We actually go into market and we provide 36 hours of in-person education in a classroom setting. So we have a selection process that helps us find, again, people who have maybe some experience or they've got some of the ingredients needed to become a developer. Maybe they own some land that they need to develop. We look for those people who we think would have the best opportunity to transition into development and launch their first project within 3 years of graduation. So again, we provide that 36 hours of in-person training, and then post-graduation, we provide them ongoing technical assistance through our local academy hosts that are very much subject matter experts in development, and they do hand-holding with these developers post-graduation to help them get what we call from concept to keys. So that way we're making sure that we're not just giving them information and they come out of class and say, okay, now what? We want to make sure that they've got a way to continue to work on those projects and get to the point where they can break ground. Another great thing with the Develop the Developer program is we continue to provide deep dive sessions to our developers post graduation so that they can continue to learn. There's a lot of different subjects that are innovative and coming into the market space, and we don't want our developers to be the last to hear about some of this new information, or different resources and tools they can use to help support their success. So we do provide ongoing deep dive sessions and also networking opportunities for our developers to really get together and share best practices. One of the challenges of working with our minority developers is that there's not a history of learned knowledge that's been passed from generation to generation. So being able to link our minority and women developers together so that they can share their best practices, learn from mistakes, learn from success, has really been a great way to help support these developers with a sense of community. So, what do we consider our keys to success? When we talked about, again, going into different communities and finding people who live in the community that want to develop and redevelop where they live, there were some basic things that we knew we would need to do. So, first of all, we wanted to provide low cost access to this program. So, the developer academies, the participants pay somewhere about $500. And that again gives them the 36 hours of instruction. During that instruction time, they work on a development project, and that becomes what we call a capstone project. That is a way for them to exhibit that they have learned something in that class. Typically, what happens is post graduation, those developers continue to work on those capstone projects, and that's what they eventually break ground on. Again, that technical assistance is there to help those developers post graduation take that capstone project from concept to keys. And then another big part of this is, we have emerging developers that are often utilizing their own resources, their own financing to get this first development project up off the ground. But we also want to make sure these developers are aware and educated about grant and subsidy programs that are in their markets that they can utilize to help support pre-development costs, to help support some of the development gap costs from development to for sale. And we'll see some examples of what that has looked like in some of our developers projects. But we want to make sure they're aware of these grant and subsidy programs, and if they need some type of assistance to apply or respond to RFPs, then we again have our subject matter experts there in the marketplace to help them. So when we launched this program, there were things that we thought would indicate success, and what we wanted to see was high diverse participant representation. We launch our developer academy program in what we consider underserved markets, and these are typically areas that have a high minority census tract areas. They could be in persistent poverty areas. They have different attributes like aging housing stock, or undeveloped vacant land that we have a tendency to happen in our minority communities. So we felt that if we are bringing this program into these communities, we wanted to see, again, the people who live in the communities have the opportunity to come in and obtain this education and resources. And then we also wanted to see those developers create community-centric development. We wanted to see affordable housing created in areas that could need that spur of investment. We wanted to see areas like historically redlined areas, redevelopment zones, opportunity zones. We wanted to see development in that area. And we also wanted to see single family for sale units and then multifamily below market rate units. We wanted to see the combination of both. This was something that's a little bit different about our Develop the Developer program is early off, we did have a focus in single family for sale development. And many of our participants have talked about, thinking about how to get grant and subsidy dollars. It's easier to find those types of dollars in the multifamily space, for instance, through LIHTC financing. But in the single family for sale space, that was more of a challenge. So our developers have really benefited from being able to locate different grants and subsidies in their marketplace to support single family for sale development. So what have we done so far? Again, we launched off this program in 2020, and we have now hosted 9 cohorts in various different markets. And I'll give you guys an idea of where we are today and where we're going later this year. But we've hosted 9 cohorts. We have graduated 129 graduates. 80%, 86% of those graduates identify minorities, and 96% of graduates are women. So again, those were the measures of success that we were hoping for. And I think it's fantastic to see this type of participation to bring in diverse developers into this profession. Over the last 4 years, our developer graduates have produced over 300 single family units, over 500 multifamily units. They've received a whopping $37 million in grants and subsidies, and that has been a fantastic outcome of this program, really bringing investment into these underinvested areas. And another measure of success I'm looking at is our emerging developers. And again, these are people who have between 0 to 3 years experience. They have the biggest challenge in being able to obtain construction financing because they don't have a track record in development. What we have found is that these developers have been able to form relationships with local banking partners, that they understand and know that the Develop the Developer program is there to support these emerging developers. A lot of them have come to the table to support our local academy hosts. And those developers have been able to receive over $100 million in new construction financing. So, definitely some indicators of success that we've seen over the last 4 years. And we're really looking forward to continuing to expand the program. Most recently, you can see our 2024 project updates. Again, still seeing that single family for sale unit development. And, we're seeing that, again, 30% of those units or so are in redevelopment zones. But one of the things that we're seeing is we do see a lot of development happening. If they're not in the redevelopment area or the majority minority census tracts, we're seeing some developers do some things out in rural areas, understanding that there's a transition for affordability, that people who are maybe living in some of the urban areas are starting to look in some of the surrounding areas for housing. And I've got a great example of what that looks like a little bit further in this presentation. The markets that we're currently working in, as I mentioned, we launched this program initially in Omaha back in 2020. What we were looking to see in Omaha, the challenges that we were addressing, we have what we call urban prairies in that area, which is vacant lots that had not been developed in decades. And what we would see is scattered housing sites that were, causing some different challenges in the area with depressing property values. Again, a lack of affordable housing stock. And even some of the challenges with crime and things of that nature, which is vacant lots being there undeveloped. So what we started to see with our developers post graduation, realistically speaking, it still takes a couple of years, just as we suspected, for those developers to really work through their concept to breaking ground. But we do see our Omaha Academy producing the largest amount of units because they've been up and running the longest. And they have created some great net zero housing units, zero entry or no step housing units are some of the things that they're looking at as well. So they're making great strides there. In 2022, we launched in Tulsa, and we focused in the historic Greenwood area. If you're familiar with the race massacres in Tulsa, this was the area where we saw a tremendous millions and millions of dollars of housing units burned down in that period of time. And the Greenwood district just has never really recovered. They've gone through several different variations of housing discrimination, relocation in that area. And we also have, a very mixed community of Black, we have Native American, Hispanic, that are living in and surrounding the Greenwood district. So, we knew that this historic site restoration would be something we wanted to focus in on and helping to ensure that those communities don't continue to go through gentrification. We wanted to see a mix of single family, multifamily units. And what we did see in Tulsa is some great use of multi-use development, right? So we've got, maybe retail shopping at the bottom with 5 or 6 single family residential for sale at the top. We've also seen some pretty large projects come up that have been multifamily mixed use. And also they're starting to look at the use of manufactured housing in those areas as well to do some urban infill. Just last year, we launched in the Milwaukee area. Our Milwaukee Academy had a major focus in utilizing TIF funds. So the TIF funds were focused in redevelopment, and they actually had a few developers, or they had a few, let's say, community members that wanted to become developers that had applied for TIF funding and had gotten approved, but didn't really have any experience in development. So the goal of bringing in this program was to help those developers get up to speed and give them some tools, education, resources, technical assistance to get from concept to keys. So some of the challenges that we're working through in Milwaukee with our development is they are heavily focused in redeveloping in that Milwaukee area. So not a lot of new, vacant land or ground up construction. But definitely looking at retrofitting aging housing stock and thinking about how to do climate resilient retrofits is a big focus in Milwaukee as well, and something we're really going to be focusing in for the rest of the year for 2024. And coming up this year, this is hot off the press. You all are one of the first to hear this, but we are going to be launching our next academy in Baltimore in September of this year. We're going to be partnering with Home Free USA, and they are going to be launching our first academy in Baltimore and focusing in again on redevelopment, some ground up construction, and maybe not so much maybe in the heart of Baltimore, but thinking about some of the surrounding areas. So we expect applications to open up for this academy in June. So if you're, interested, or if you know someone who's interested in getting into the Develop the Developer program that is in Baltimore, DC, Maryland, surrounding areas, please, keep an eye on our Freddie Mac Develop the Developer website to learn more. So I talked to you all a little bit about some of the projects that our developers have worked on. So let me give you just a couple of quick tours on some of what those developers have done post graduation. One of the things that I'm always in awe with our developers is we hoped when we first launched this program that developers would come out of the program and maybe try their first 1 or 2 units. And what we're seeing is that our developers are coming out of this project and they are biting off some pretty big projects. So Franchelle Abdallah is one of our developer graduates that actually went through our Omaha cohort. She was part of our inaugural cohort graduates, and she relocated to Tulsa and was very much a big part of us launching the Develop the Developer program in Tulsa. I use this example for Franchelle because post-graduation, Franchelle had the support, the means, the tools, the resources to respond to an RFP for a very large redevelopment project that you can see here, which is an historic area in Greenwood. And what Franchelle proposed was a multifamily mixed-use development that would, bring or revitalize this area and bring it back to life in the Greenwood area. I am saddened to announce, well, I don't want to announce, but saddened to say that Franchelle was not able to complete this project because she did have an experienced developer that had partnered with her that subsequently ended up bowing out of the project. And what we learned from this example was Franchelle was able to come out of the program She was able to gain community support. She had a viable construction project, but there's still more need for mentorship and experienced developer partnerships to really help these developers bring some of these larger projects to fruition. Our next developer that I wanted to highlight for you is Tamara Bruno. Love Tamara's story. I talked to you all a little bit about some of that rural development in Omaha. This is a great example. Tamara Bruno has some previous experience as a contractor. She owns a contracting company, and she always tells me that I kept in the back of my head that one day I wanted to become a developer. I just really wasn't sure how to do that. So she went through our Develop the Developer program and again just hit the ground running. So she has received the community disaster recovery block grants. And this is a great example of she received like a $25 million block grant. And what that helped her do was to redevelop an area in Omaha that had gone through flooding. All the people in that area were relocated out. It was a lot of senior citizens in that area that lost affordable housing, that were renters in that area and forced to move. So Tamara has broken ground on this fantastic project. She is out there building 24 new for sale units, costing $350,000 per unit to develop, but she's able to sell those units for $175,000. So every single one of these units are already reserved, and many of them by senior citizens that were renting in that area that are going to be looking to purchase those homes. And yes, if you're wondering if the flooding challenge has been solved in that area, yes, this was in conjunction with the city of Omaha to reinforce some of the challenges or levees out in that area to ensure that that area does not remain a flood zone. Donnell Brown is another great example of a developer graduate. I love Donnell's story because he came out of the program. He had a couple of vacant plots that he wanted to redevelop on, but on that block that he was working, there was a couple of more aging housing stock that was in that area that he found out were owned by Habitat for Humanity. And they just hadn't had the time and the resources to get to those two particular units. So Donnell was able to strike a deal with Habitat for Humanity that he would go ahead and take ownership of those properties. He was able to purchase those properties from Habitat. He is now working on redeveloping a whole block now because he's got his vacant units plus the houses that are those aging housing units that he bought for Habitat, with the agreement that those units would be available for some of the people who have signed up for Habitat for Humanity and are waiting for housing stock. So great example of a private community-focused developer partnering with a community developer nonprofit organization and helping to make housing units available. Again, he also received $1.2 million of grant and subsidy dollars from a local organization, Front Porch Investments, that learned about the Develop the Developer program and came to the table looking to help support these developers with providing pre-development financing and funding. And finally, Justine Knapp, last but not least. I love Justine's story because Justine was actually working for a housing finance authority, or actually a housing authority. Justine Knapp works for the Northern Ponca Housing Authority. And this is a Native American tribe that is not a federally recognized tribe. They are a state recognized tribe. And what that means for them is they don't have reservation land for their tribe. And one of the dreams that they have with the Northern Ponca tribe is they really wanted to create an area, a community for their tribe to live in, be in close proximity, and really start to build that oneness with their tribe. So Justine attended the Developers Academy as an employee of the Northern Ponca Housing Authority and decided she was going to become their developer. And she has subsequently broken ground on her first development with 20 housing units. These are zero entry units, meaning no steps to the house or within the house. They're really looking to reserve these homes for their seniors that are part of their tribes, so that they can, again, build that community that they have wished for and wanted for so long. So as you can see, building a storm shelter, a community garage, are things that they're looking at do to help support that community. So really proud and happy of the work that Justine is doing. So now that you've seen, the overview of the developer program and what some of our developers have been up to thus far, that brings me to, my reason for being here today. We're really looking at how we can continue to expand the developer program. We are looking at launching into new markets over the next few years. Myself, I work in the equitable housing space at Freddie Mac. So we're really looking at how we can use this to create more equitable access to housing, specifically in our minority communities and our underserved communities. But we're also looking at how we can use this program to support some of our duty to serve efforts that focus in high need rural areas as well. So some of the things that we're looking at is widening access to education. One big thing that's bubbling up to the top throughout our communities, whether it's through our developers or through stakeholder feedback, is the need to create climate resilient housing stock. We have a challenge in the country with aging housing stock that's really not prepared to go into the future with the
It does sound as if Cassandra's audio has cut out. Okay, great. Well, hopefully Cassandra will be able to hop back on. Cassandra, I see you moving your mute there real quick. Yeah, we can certainly see you. I just am unable to hear you. Okay. What I think we'll do at this point then is attempt to move on. And if we can get Cassandra's audio back up, certainly we'll have Cassandra jump back on with us. But at a minimum, definitely want to thank Cassandra Skidanov for the presentation. So much that we learned throughout the course of the presentation, such a diversity of projects, and really just so well designed. Excited to see what the future for the Develop the Developer program is. It does look like Cassandra's going to try and jump back on and off. So hopefully we can see the conclusion of her presentation here in just a moment. In the meantime, if there are particular questions that folks from our audience here have, please do drop those in the Q&A. At a minimum, we can ensure that those can get those can get responded to. Adrian Knight, I see that you are raising your hand.
Can you hear me now?
I can, Cassandra. How are you?
I am great. Technology will not let us be great sometimes. But I'm glad that we had this technical difficulty at the end of the presentation. Uh, so let me just say again, we're looking at ways that we can support education. We're also looking at ways that we can add some mentorship opportunities. So there may be, individuals listening that have experience in development that are interested in helping and, being a subject matter experts, sharing some expertise. Or again, as I mentioned before, we've had developers that have been able to get some pretty large development projects, get to the point where they're getting acceptance for RFPs, but maybe they need a more experienced developer to support them. So ways that we can think about partnering with NCST to help expand the program is, really something I'm looking forward to over the next few years.
Well,
So with,
fantastic.
I'll end there and see if we've got some questions I can answer.
I see some popping in, most certainly, and I appreciate that that open ending there as well. No doubt, as we move forward, there'll be opportunities for collaboration and the like. I was really struck by in your presentation some of what you offered in terms of the success measures that you thought through from the outset. Right, this component of ensuring, of course, that there's diverse participants, that it's community centric, and then also this focus on single family for sale development. And through your examples that you shared in various communities, Omaha, Tulsa, I'm sure the same true in Milwaukee and Baltimore, there's clearly both a need and an opportunity for some pretty innovative ways of getting single family development done. I wonder, do you agree that I'm reading that right? And is that the kind of thing you're looking for in the future?
Yes, absolutely. So, we start thinking about the innovation space. There's a lot of topics that we're seeing bubbling up to the top. Some of them I would say, we use the words innovative, but it's things that, those of us who've been in this community development space have been talking about for a long time, like using manufactured housing as urban infill. But how do we do this in a way where the community feels like that manufactured housing belongs in the space? So those are some of the topics that we're looking at and how we can bring in new types of housing units. But there's also been subjects like 3D printing is something that's bubbling up that we're helping our developers learn more about. Accessory dwelling units or ADUs. In some of our markets, ADUs are something that can be not only a remedy for affordable housing, but multi-generational housing or helping to drive income for people who live in the community that maybe want to rent out a unit.
Mm-hmm.
So we're definitely looking at more ways to think innovatively and out of the box on how to not just build that for sale development, but also redeveloping housing units as well.
Fantastic, and I love the reminder that what appears innovative is actually a lot of the same things that we've been thinking about for some time, and now is really coming to fruition, being realized. So, as you pointed out, we do want to get to a few questions. There were a number that seem to lean into the places where our audiences are located. A question from Helen Turner: is Cassandra's program in Chicago? Is not yet maybe the right answer on that one?
Not yet. And I see a question about, Dallas as well. So some of the things that we're thinking about is we do have, like I said, again, that emerging developer cohort that really does do that deep dive for those people who have 0 to 3 years of experience. So, we try to do that in person because we have gotten the feedback from the developers that that's the best way to do it. So we're looking at, trying to expand out into different markets. And if I say I had a hit list of markets planned out for the next 10 years, not quite. But I can tell you some of the markets that we do focus in on are markets that have a lack of affordable housing supply, also a lot of aging housing stock, vacant land, and have a high exposure to climate related events. And that also includes extreme heat and extreme cold, by the way. A lot of people said, how did Milwaukee get, for instance, get priority over like someplace in Florida? Climate related events, they are affecting housing stock in a lot of different ways.
100%. I hear that. There are in the Q&A a number of other communities, folks reaching out about their communities in New Jersey and in others. There's a question here. I'm in Baltimore. How do I get an application?
Yeah, if you're in Baltimore, you may be familiar with Home Free Baltimore or Home Free USA. Definitely reach out to them. And they're going to be opening up their applications, I believe, in June. You can also check out our website at freddiemac.com/develop the developer. And you'll see more information updating about applications there as well. And I see, speaking about more experienced developers and going back to coming into some of the markets like Dallas, Chicago, New Jersey. We are looking at ways that we can provide some of our supplemental deep dive sessions for developers who maybe have more experience and don't need that development 101, but we can still help to share that information with the developers and bringing in some deep dive sessions or mini cohorts with organizations like NCST, for instance. So these are some of the things that we're thinking about, how can we get this information out to more developers throughout the country?
I love that idea of really meeting organizations and individuals where they're at that particular moment as well. A couple detailed questions here. One, have the developer participants encountered issues with scale of development and inflation of capital and labor over the past few years, and how have they been supported through those development cost challenges in achieving affordability goals?
Yes, absolutely. And I would say they feel it harder than most, right? Again, these are developers, and I'm just to be, transparent. A lot of our developers are coming in and they're taking money out of their 401k, right? To get their first project up and running, especially those that are doing like the onesie, twosie. I'm going to flip my first property, or going to work on my first maybe 4 or 5 duplexes. So we're really conscious of making sure that we're helping those developers protect their own personal investments. And the best way that we've been able to do that is help them identify subsidy and grant financing, or what we consider not just the grant dollars, but also cheap and patient capital, is the way that we try to coin it. So that has been a combination of philanthropic organizations coming to the table that are interested in supporting minority and women developers and increasing affordable housing stock. And they have been phenomenal in all of our different markets with providing pre-development dollars or helping to subsidize some of the development projects, and also supporting our local academy hosts so that they can continue to run the program after Freddie Mac's helped to actually set the program up. So I think that's probably been the biggest help for these, our emerging developers. A lot of the infrastructure dollars that have been coming through the Biden administration, coming in through federal dollars that are eventually trickling down through the municipalities, have been a big help for that as well.
Certainly. Okay, there's a question here with respect to Tulsa. The question is the Tulsa market still available for participation? And maybe an add-on to that is, what is the thought process with those more established communities for developer, Tulsa, Omaha, moving forward?
Yeah, so absolutely. Tulsa is still up and running. As a matter of fact, I am going to be flying out today to Tulsa to go to they have a graduation happening on the 17th. So they are still graduating developers. And again, if you're looking for information on that Tulsa Academy, you can check that out on our website. That is going through the historic Greenwood District is hosting this academy. And they are looking at continuing to host cohorts. And they're also offering some hands-on opportunities where they're partnering developers, some of our emerging developers with more experienced developers, to help them get some hands-on experience.
Understood. Wonderful. Well, that's probably as much as we're going to be able to get through. And I appreciate that that you've got some travel to Tulsa then right in front of you as well. Cassandra Skidanov, thank you again so much. Really, it was a pleasure having you join us for today's call. This is just such an exciting program. And with that, I think we're going to move over for some updates and insights in the federal and policy and regulatory space. Emmy McClintock is joining us as well. Emmy, I'll let you take it away.
Great. Thanks so much, Chris. Good afternoon, everyone. It's so good to see such a great turnout. For those of you who I have not yet met, my name is Emmy McClintock, and I'm a policy analyst here at NCST. And before we wrap up what has been such a great presentation, thank you, Cassandra, so much. I just wanted to share a couple of updates from our policy pillar, starting off with our letter on the new markets tax credit application. So as I just put in the chat, the Homeownership Alliance New Markets Tax Credit Working Group recently submitted an application on the 2024 allocation application. So just for a bit of context, back in February, the CDFI fund put out a request for public comment on ways in which they could enhance their application ahead of their 2024 to 2026 funding rounds. So our working group, which is made up of different members of the Homeownership Alliance, as well as national advocates, really used this as an opportunity to make some recommendations on ways that the CDFI fund can utilize this tax credit as a means to counter our nation's affordable supply crisis and ultimately increase homeownership opportunities. So again, anyone interested in that, please feel free to view the letter that I just put in the chat. Next up is our Homeownership Alliance letter to Secretary Janet Yellen at the Department of Treasury. So again, putting this one in the chat as well, but the Homeownership Alliance submitted a letter calling on Treasury to establish a program for mission-driven entities to build and rehabilitate affordable owner-occupied homes for low and moderate income households. So this letter detailed the specific and immediate need for a pool of funds dedicated strictly to homeownership purposes. And it also went into detail on the various ways and increasing resources within the fund can ultimately add to the number of homeownership units across the country. So again, please feel free to take a look at that. Moving on, we also recently heard that FHFA had released its final rulemaking on fair lending, fair housing, and equitable housing finance plans. This rule was announced at the end of April, and it's garnered just a lot of support and praise from housing practitioners really around the country. Both NCST and the Homeownership Alliance view this rule as a major step forward in addressing the issues of equity within the housing finance system. And overall, we're very, very pleased to see the various improvements that this new rule will have on expanding market access to some of the most underserved communities. With this, we will also plan to speak at FHFA's public listening session. This will take place on June 5th, and we'll plan to applaud FHFA for all of its great work that it's done on this final rule, and also offer some recommendations on ways that the agency can continue to grow and strengthen the program. And finally, we continue to do advocacy on the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act. So as many of you know, this legislation was not included in the pending tax package that was introduced in both the House and the Senate earlier this year. However, we are very pleased to see that this bill continues to gain momentum on both sides of the aisle. We now have 70 co-sponsors in the House and 10 in the Senate. And if anyone is interested in learning more about the Neighborhood Homes Coalition and the legislation itself, feel free to visit our website. And last but not least, I would be remiss to close us out without reminding you all about the opportunity to join the Homeownership Alliance. If you're a national nonprofit focused on affordable homeownership, please feel free to reach out to Elizabeth Coates. She is normally here presenting at this hour, but she is our director of the Homeownership Alliance, and she would be more than happy to get in touch with you and answer any questions you might have. And again, her email is now in the chat. So thank you all, and I'll pass it back to you, Chris.
Emmy, thank you so much. Thanks once again. I know how valuable these monthly updates are for our network and our broader audience. And speaking of which, to our attendees, thank you. Again, we will make sure that today's presentation is added to our website, so make sure to check out ncst.org. We'll be back next month, so please plan to join us for that. As always, that call will be the third Wednesday of the month. Same time, 12:30 Eastern. So in this case, that'll be on June the 19th. And we'll see you then. From all of us at NCST, have a great rest of your week. Thanks so much. Bye.